Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for August 15th. Before we start this evening, I'd ask everybody silence their phones with the exception of our emergency personnel. And Commissioner George is en route. She's flying back in. She's been on a work-related trip and she's flying back in, so you might see her walk in a little later in the meeting. With that, would you please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. First order of business is to approve the agenda. Commissioners, it has been distributed. You have it in your packets.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented this evening. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is the approval of the minutes of August 1st, 2022. They have been distributed. They are on pages 3 through 4 in your packet.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 1st, 2022. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item E is the building permits. Building permits have been distributed. They are in the packet. They are on pages 5 through 7.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as distributed on pages 5 through 7 of the packet. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through H. Item I has been stricken because we received no documentation. So again, the consent agenda is items A through H and pages starting on page 8 and ending on page 43.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda on items A through H. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, we are now on the regular agenda. Item number 1 is the dissolution of the Public Outreach Committees and the Agricultural Committee of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. We'll have Mr. John Shockley, who serves as a legal counsel both for the city and for the Diversion Authority, speak on this item. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. I'm just pinch hitting for Joel Paulson, the Executive Director, who's not able to make it tonight. Just a very short update. The board had requested that we provide updates to the different entities that provide members to the Diversion Authority Board. Currently, there are 2 subcommittees that exist, Ag Policy Committee and a Public Outreach Committee. The Diversion Board of Authority has been having several workshops within the last year talking about governance strategies and trying to make items more efficient as the diversion transitions from a board that is seeking appropriations to a board that's implementing construction of the project. As part of that discussion, they're going to form a planning committee and roll some of these other actions into the planning committee. The Public Outreach Committee has only been meeting sporadically, and it was felt that the planning committee, given its scope and jurisdiction, would be better suited to deal with the public outreach issues. So they wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we weren't, the diversion was not going to stop public outreach. It was just moving that to a different committee. But just because of naming and the way communications work now, it was felt that it was really important to let everybody know. We're still going to be doing public outreach. It's just going to be handled by a different committee. And on the Ag Outreach Committee, most of the input from the producers has largely went into the different programs, from the crop insurance to the prevent plant programs to how the flowage easements, and so it's really implementation right now. That said, there may be from time to time issues that come before the diversion dealing with ag issues, and that would best be dealt with at the planning committee level. Once again, we don't expect that there would be a lot of those issues, but those functions will still be handled just by a different committee. And the intent would be to bring this before the Diversion Authority Board at its September meeting to approve moving these two committees' functions into the planning committee and dissolving the two subcommittees. Can certainly answer any questions you might have. That's really the extent of the update, but happy to answer any questions I can or find the right person to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions, commissioners? All right, thank you. Item number 2 is a request to amend an ordinance in regards to feeding wildlife within the city limits of West Fargo. This item will be presented by Donna Henches, pages 45 through 49 in your packets, gentlemen. Good evening. Would you please step to the microphone, state your name and address, please?
Donna Henches, 707 Northridge Way, West Fargo.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you want me to read my request, or can we just bypass that and go to the
You
conversation?
can, whatever presentation you have for us this evening, we welcome it.
I'm Donna Henches, and this is my neighbor, Keela Howell. Together, we jointly have put a request of some suggestions to the City Commission on the growing population of geese in West Fargo, specifically the Charleswood area. I have 128 signatures from people in my neighborhood who share our concern. In the packet, I included 4 pictures for action. Please note, 3 of these pictures only show / prove that people are feeding / taming the geese. One picture depicts the magnitude of the problem. I have several more pictures and videos on my iPad dating back to 2019. I moved to Charleswood in 2004. Between 2004 and 2014, we had no problem with the geese. 2015 was not a good sign of things to come. And Evergreen Estates residents, and Evergreen Estates, the villas at Charleswood, and Northridge townhomes all share on this pond with some private neighbors. An Evergreen Estates resident started bringing bread home from our local Sun Mart and commenced feeding geese. She has since stopped. In 2019 and 2020, a resident of the villas at Charleswood began ground feeding the geese with seed meant for a bird feeder. In 2021 and 2022, another villas resident commenced feeding / taming the geese by throwing handfuls or containers of feed on the ground. Subsequently, the geese are claiming territory. They don't want to be chased off the bike / walking path. Some of the geese are becoming aggressive. They are destroying lawns and park board property. Our yards can't be enjoyed due to the goose poop. The bike walking path at times is hard to navigate because of the goose poop. Many people are scared of the geese. In 2019, an Evergreens Estate resident approached the people who are feeding the geese and was rebuked. This summer, Keela and I talked with the president of the Villas at Charleswood HOA about the issue. A letter was sent from the president to all Villas HOA members requesting that they be good neighbors and stop feeding the geese. When nothing changed, the Villas Board of Directors held a meeting with these individuals and were again rebuked. Taxpayers paid for a bike / walking path for the people to enjoy, not for the geese. We shouldn't be held hostage by a few residents who don't care about us or the neighborhood. Thank you for your attention, And now I'll ask Keela to share some of the suggestions on possible solutions to the problem.
Again, ma'am, would you please state your name and the address of which you reside? Thank you.
Yes, it's Keela, K-E-L-A, Howell, H-O-W-E-L-L. My address is 731 Northridge Way, and it's in Charleswood,
Thank you.
West Fargo. First, I will address the issue with the feeding of the ducks, and then the issue of what do we do about the ducks that are there and limiting them. I spoke with Mr. Shockley on the phone and asked him about the ordinance, and the present ordinance has to do with feeding of animals, but does not apply, but it applies to only feeding of farm animals. Therefore, a new and specific ordinance needs to be approved by the City Commission. We request that a significant fine of at least $500 be attached as a penalty, and that a specific agency be identified as to which agency is enforcing or will enforce the ordinance. That is our request as far as the geese feeding. The other issue is what do we do about the hordes of geese that we have at this point? And I spoke with Mr. Mike Szymanski from the North Dakota Game and Fish, and he informed me that 15 years ago, there were 40,000 geese in North Dakota. Now, 15 years later, there are 400,000 geese, so it's becoming a substantial problem. With no natural predators in the metropolitan or city areas, they are multiplying quickly, and their behavior dominates other wildlife. We have noticed a decrease in the number of ducks in our local ponds. The geese also return to their nesting areas where they were born, so that next year these geese will again be coming back to our neighborhoods. The West Fargo City Commission may request a permit from Mr. Szymanski's office, and this would be explaining methods of eliminating or culling these gaggles of geese. This can be done, they reduce them by spraying of eggs, which prevent them from hatching, also from rounding up geese and relocating them or euthanizing them. So these are the issues that we have to face, and hopefully something can be done about it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, do you have questions for the ladies?
I do.
Please, Commissioner.
Thank you. So right off the bat, as I hear you and listen to me, it sounds more like a civil matter than it does a city issue. Now, I'm not passing the buck, so well, you know, I'm just, so you hear me before you go sit down, don't have to stand up. But I know you have an association, and it appears as if your association is agreeing with you and they don't want the ducks there, is that correct?
Yes.
So then, the association has recourse as far as, I know you said they sent them a letter and so forth, but they can actually more or less evict them from the area if they don't agree to the rules, can they not?
Go ahead. I'm just going to say we have several different HOAs.
Okay, so it's not just one, there you go.
No.
Okay, so it's more than
And
one.
they're also, it's in a neighborhood where some people own the land privately. So they're not in an HOA. So we're just trying to find some recourse as to who can handle this problem.
So within Charleswood, there's more than one HOA, you're saying?
Yes.
Isn't there one overall
There's
covenant that Bruce put in years ago? I'm sorry, pardon?
3 HOAs on this pond, plus privately owned homes.
Okay, so years ago when Bruce Clapham, he was the developer there, did he not put in one covenants for the entire area?
I'm not aware that Charleswood is an HOA. No one has ever told us that we belong to an HOA.
I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I would think Bruce would have done that. John, do you know anything about that? Pardon? Well, I realize that, but a covenant stays forever.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Mr. Shockley?
I do recall there being a development group, and that's the signs that was at the entrance of the development. I don't know if he created an HOA out of the covenants. I'd have to go back and double check.
Okay, so it doesn't sound that easy anyway. I was thinking, that's all. It was just a comment. I'm not making a decision, so you know.
It has been an issue not having that because as far as I know, people do not pay dues into the HOA of Charleswood if there is one. And now it's kind of an ongoing problem as to who takes care of the trees and the entryway, that kind of thing.
So could I ask for clarification? The resident that's feeding the geese, are they in your association in your HOA? No.
They are in the HOA that Lynn Flugrath is president of, if you'd like to make some comments, Lynn.
Just, okay, so he's not in your particular one?
No.
Okay, very good. Mr. Shockley, an ordinance to feeding wildlife, as it was noted on the agenda, is much too broad, in my opinion. Obviously, you're not going to, but we're talking specifically about a species of bird, a goose. Are you aware of any other type of ordinances of that effect
Yes,
in our
actually.
surrounding communities?
Yes, Mr. Commission President, I actually am very aware of it and very familiar with the issue. In Moorhead, they had a similar problem with people feeding turkeys, and the turkey population massively exploded. And so I have quite a bit of familiarity with this. I'm very sympathetic to it, this case, because I think the geese are probably worse than the turkeys because they do take over area, and I think they reproduce faster. When they called my office, I had an opportunity to speak with them about it. I really see it as if we wanted to have the ability to prosecute and wanted to have a strong ordinance in place about prohibiting the feeding of animals, which I have a template, we can clean that up and get that to you the next meeting if that's what you wanted. I did express that I don't get to make those decisions, so that would be up to the commission if you wanted me to prepare that ordinance. And probably the second issue is the city does, I think, and this is probably a Dustin or a Tina question, the city probably does have some interest in keeping wildlife out of the ponds, because I don't know long-term if you have thousands of geese, I don't know what that will do to the ponds and the water quality and the smell and those sorts of issues. So I don't know if Dustin or...
Mr. Dustin Scott, Assistant City Administrator of the City of West Fargo.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, John, for the invite up to the podium. Yes, Mr. Shockley is absolutely correct. There is a vested interest in, I wouldn't necessarily be as blunt to say all wildlife staying out of our ponds. You know, there is an environmental concern to keep things of a natural order and environmental regulations that we do have to follow. But we have, over the years, experienced problems with, especially with the geese. I know the Park District has tried a couple proactive measures to try to deter geese, but those things are, those were temporary solutions, and typically after a year or two, they learn to get around them. We experience these issues at all of our retention ponds, really. So my only concern moving forward would be the enforcement side, and as they mentioned, you know, that's one of their requests is to establish some type of enforcement. You know, it's one thing to put the law in place, but then you have to be out and diligent and enforce it, and we'll just have to put some time in thinking that through. And so, yes, again, I'd certainly like to see this move forward in some capacity. I just don't know what the end result will end up looking like, but putting time and effort into it is a good idea.
What would you perceive to be the enforcement authorization with the City of West Fargo?
I would, from my perspective, having been through this once before, it would be a citation into municipal court and they would be prosecuted. So we would have we're not prohibiting ducks and geese and turkeys from being in the ponds, but we are prohibiting people from feeding them, because the more you feed them, the more they come back to, they're pretty smart. They come back to the same spots. And so you would be prohibiting them from feeding them or putting food out or baiting. And we'd probably create some sort of exception for like legitimate, like if you're a rural resident and you're, feeding your geese on the river or something, that's probably different. We could work through that, but it would be you could either have it as a report, just like property maintenance violation, and then it's pled into municipal court, or if it gets bad enough, potentially somebody could write a citation to the person, and it would go to municipal court and be punished the same way.
This is a law enforcement citation?
It could be, or it could be, we could set it up where it could be like a code enforcement citation too.
Yeah, I would say, Mayor, sir, if I could, I would say I definitely don't want to put any more on the chief. They've got enough going on, but a code enforcement would be the better way to go with this.
And we have a code enforcement officer.
We do, so.
City. Commissioner Olson?
With that mind, thinking that way, would the code enforcement officers have to catch them in the act or not?
Yeah, I think so too.
So,
Mr. Shockley?
great question. I've prosecuted these before based upon video. Like if your neighbor and videotape the person actually feeding them, that's great evidence. Hand it over to the code enforcement officer. Our problem is typically on these types of property violations, people call and complain, but they don't document it. Like the dog is barking. Okay, I can't prove that the dog's barking. I need, somebody's got to witness it. So you have to be willing to stand up in front of the municipal judge and say, yeah, the dog's barking, or they're feeding geese, or take a video, which is even better.
May I ask for a raise of hands, please, first? All the folks that are here this evening regarding this issue, would you please just raise your hand? If there is anyone here that's here to support the geese this evening, would you raise your hand? Roger, put your hand down. Okay. Our chief of police has a comment he'd like to make, please.
Thanks, Commissioner President and Commissioners. I just, a lot of these things, the code enforcement piece of it will fall on the police department as well, since their office now out of the police department. But a majority of these issues, before they reach the point of a criminal citation or something that makes it into municipal court, we would hope that we would be able to address that through education. And that probably most likely will happen the first time we end up out at somebody's door and let them know that it could lead to a citation. We wouldn't go out and most likely cite on the first offense or the first report. We like to be able to educate the residents because it'd be a brand new ordinance if it goes through, things like that. So it would be, we would deal with this first and foremost through education, and then if there's non-compliance, then we would ultimately have to end up in enforcing it through citations or through municipal court if we have to.
Thank you, Chief. Ma'am, you had something else for us?
Yes, I do. When I mentioned Mike Szymanski from the North Dakota Game and Fish, we also have that issue to deal with. How do we cull the geese that are there? What can we do about preventing them from those eggs from hatching next year? We do not have permission to do that, but we can get the permission by requesting the permit, by your requesting the permit from the Game and Fish. There are other areas in Fargo that have done this and that have been able to spray the eggs. That's not necessarily a simple thing to do when you have all these geese that are very aggressive. But the eggs can be sprayed, and that will prevent them from hatching. And this is what Mr. Szymanski suggested. But the permit needs to come. We can't get the permit. It has to be a government body. So he said the permit, you could request it from his office, and he will give you the permit, which would allow for this kind of thing to take place.
Very good, thank you.
I'm a little nervous.
Do we, excuse me, do we have the 128 signatures on your document? Do we have a copy of that? We would, this young lady here, Emily, if you would be so kind as to provide her a copy with that. Commissioner Olson.
Question for you. If we would go that route through Game and Fish and get a permit to go out and spray the eggs, the city would have to spray the eggs, or would Game and Fish spray the eggs?
You know, that would be something that you could discuss with Game and Fish, but it's, you know, it would give us the permission. I don't know how the other areas have done it. I know that Bluemont Lakes has done it, and.
Mr.
So
Shockley,
and
do you have a
it
response?
does help to keep those from all, we have some of the families this year, these geese families, where there would be 12 little ones, and nothing, there wasn't anything there to kill those little ones. So they have all survived, and they're all growing, and they'll be back.
I'm most familiar with the netting and the relocation of the birds. I'm not as familiar with the spraying of.
Okay. Here's what I'd like to do. I would suggest the commission take this under advisement. What we're going to do is I'm going to appoint a committee this evening. I'd like Chief Ordinance involved in it. I'd like Mr. Shockley to be a part of that conversation, and City Administrator Mrs. Fisk, and one Commissioner, Brad Olson. I'd like you to have a meeting within our second meeting in September, that we have an answer for these folks as to what, how we'll proceed with this request.
Great. Thank you very much.
Commissioners? I need your,
Is that a little bit quick? Second meeting, that doesn't give
it's
a lot to come up with an ordinance. I think that's too quick.
not an ordinance.
I mean, well, even, okay.
Suggestions of how we proceed, and then we'll decide. Mrs. Fisk?
Yes, I was just going to say, that's a full month, so we should be able to get together and come up with suggestions for commissioner recommendations.
Again, Commissioners, I need a,
I'll make a motion to take this under advisement and set up the committee you
Thank you.
just mentioned.
Commissioner Simmons, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson, we have a motion and a second to set up a committee of Mr. Shockley, Mrs. Fisk, Mr. Commissioner Olson, and Chief Ordinance on how to proceed with this question that the public's brought forward to us with regard to the geese in our retention ponds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you all very much for coming this evening and bringing this to our attention. Commissioner George is in the house. Welcome.
Thank you. Flew right in.
Item number 3 is an update. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Just come from the airport?
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on. Item number 3 is an update on the access and safety concerns at Chi West Garden Center. Dustin Scott, Assistant City Administrator, will be presenting.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, members of the commission. During your last meeting, we had a request from the property owner on the corner of 40th Avenue and Cheyenne Street, the Cheyenne West Gardens, request the city to address safety concerns in the area, as well as provide an additional access into their site. The commission directed staff to work with the property owner and see what options there are, and then come back to the commission and provide an update. So our Public Works Director and our city engineer did meet with the property owner. They discussed some options. The purpose of tonight is to give you an update on where that progress is at. We don't have a final action here tonight. This is just purely an informational and for an update. The one option to address the safety concerns, which Public Works is planning to do themselves, you see here on the screen a sketch of what the proposed action is to address safety, and that's to remove the driveway of the recycling facility. This mitigates the safety concern where, as you recall, the last meeting, vehicles are coming through the recycling center, turning out onto 40th, and then turning back into the Cheyenne West Gardens. Removing this driveway will minimize that safety risk or eliminate it. And then we could also, if doing that, we can also then expand the recycling center, add some concrete here. And then, of course, we would also extend a fence along the perimeter of the site. So addressing the safety concern that was brought forward, we feel like this would be a relatively quick solution and effective.
Excuse me, is the fence designed then to keep debris from going into the neighboring business?
Yes, that's what
To
we
try
will-
and, to try and
Absolutely.
mitigate that? Thank you.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. So again, first and foremost for us, it was to address the safety concerns, and we appreciate the property owner for bringing that to our attention. The other discussion, and I don't have any drawings for this, but in terms of the access moving forward, Matt Anvik and Dan Hansen talked with Shy West property owner to possibly put in a driveway from 4th Street, just south of the water tower, and then into the south side of their facility. There are a couple challenges to work through with that, but that is what they are exploring. The challenges being that there is a 125-foot wide western area power supply easement there, so overhead power lines. We would also have to pave 4th Street and, of course, work out an agreement for encroaching the city's right-of-way or dedicate an easement. So there's some things to work through there, but that is, as of right now, the property owner is pursuing some options and vetting that through our Public Works and Engineering departments. So again, tonight was just a brief update. At the last meeting, you wanted this back tonight, so at this point, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Scott?
I have one.
Commissioner?
Dustin, as the engineers and planning's looking at this, I mean, I'm thinking the dollar signs right away. Who's responsible for paying for this?
Absolutely. So at this point, the conversation was that the property owner would pay for these improvements.
Okay,
My understanding is the property owner did ask that if possible, can the city create an assessment district that they would be the only participant within that assessment district? And we haven't really started to vet that through
Okay.
legal, but yes, they would financially be on the hook here.
Additional questions, Commissioner? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And this is a non-actionable item and just for information this evening. Item number 4 is Officer Wellness Cardiac Screening Program, Chief Ordinance, Chief of Police, City of West Fargo.
Pull anything up.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. Just wanted to provide a brief update tonight as it relates to one facet of our officer wellness program. Commission President Dardis and Commissioner Simmons in particular will remember a conversation that we had at Essentia Hospital almost a year ago after we had our second police officer suffer a heart attack on duty here in the city of West Fargo. So since that time, we've been working diligently to come up with a solution to figure out why the program that we were utilizing up until now hadn't caught symptoms for 2 of our police officers that had just recently gone through medical screenings. And so we have been working with our law enforcement partners, both at the Fargo Police Department, Cass County Sheriff's Office, some folks regionally and nationally, and we have come up with what we believe is a program that will take care of some of the things that we've been dealing with over the last little over a year and a half. And so just a couple real quick points to point out. Some of the research that we've come across since last October, according to the American Heart Association, the average police officer who suffers a heart attack is 49 years old compared to the general public at age 67. There's a Harvard study out as well that talks about police officers in particular and their likelihood to have a cardiac event while on duty. And they're 34 to 69 times higher percentage of having a cardiac arrest incident while they're restraining somebody or during an altercation with another individual. 32 to 51 times higher during a police pursuit. and 6 to 9 times higher during any kind of physical police training. So based on all that evidence and a lot of other medical evidence, we partnered with Essentia Health, who has been doing our pre-employment screenings and our yearly, sometimes every 3 years, and other times every 5 years, depending on how long you've been in law enforcement. But they have been taking care of our Century Code required cardiac screenings and health screenings. So what we've come up with a large part of this, the credit is due to Nathan Skalski, our city safety coordinator. He has been working tirelessly on this for the last 9 months to work with Essentia to put together this program. What we've come up with, and what some of the best medical cardiac experts in the country have come up with, is contained on the second page of what's in your packet. And so we are going to be switching to these cardiac screening components, hopefully as of August. Yet it may run into September before we can start. But a submaximal fitness test, and basically that is not a resting heart EKG, but more of a stress test. So either on a bicycle or on a treadmill. There's some additional blood tests that we're going to do, a heart CT scan in combination with a calcium score, and then a vascular ultrasound. So the program, the way we initially plan to roll this out, both in the police department and the fire department, is this is going to be a mandatory program for all of our police officers and firefighters. And everybody will go through a baseline screening sometime over the course of hopefully the next 4 to 6 months. Once that baseline screening is done, the employees will be categorized by risk. So some people will have to go every year for this program based on statistics. And speaking with some of the medical professionals locally, they believe that on average, most people have to go every 3 years. But some people will be in a higher risk category and have to go every year. Some might only have to go every 5 years. So we've taken those numbers and some of the statistics that some of the local medical providers have given us, and basically we've been able to, for budgeting purposes, figured about a third of each of our departments every year. And that will kind of push us out over that 1 to 5 year program. So what we're proposing to do is, again, make this mandatory for everybody. The initial screening will be covered by the city, and then any follow-up that might have to be done in terms of medical recommendations would then be covered by that employee's city-sponsored health program or health insurance. So the initial screening gets covered by the city, and then again, any follow-up care that might be required as a result of that would be covered individually by their health insurance. And I think that, in a nutshell, basically is what we're looking at, and I'm happy to stand for any questions if you might have anything.
Questions for Chief Ordinance? Commissioner George?
Do you know, is this a standard program that other cities have in their police departments, or is this kind of cutting edge for West Fargo?
This is, as far as I know, in talking with both at the most recent Chiefs of Police Conference out in Beulah, North Dakota, I think we're on the cutting edge in terms of, in the state of North Dakota, providing cardiac care, both for police and fire. I can't speak to the fire profession here in North Dakota. I'd defer to Chief Fuller, but I know from the police perspective, the Fargo Police Department is actively looking at the same program. But fortunately, we were able to roll it out a little bit quicker. And I know Cass County is as well, but I don't know of any other police department that in the state of North Dakota that's doing a program similar to this. It is gaining some traction on a national level. There are companies that provide this service. They'll actually bring these services to you at quite a bit higher price than we've negotiated here with locally, but there's a lot of advantages to having things done here locally through Essentia Health, who already maintains all of our medical files anyway, because they do all of our pre-employment and yearly screenings. So,
Thank you.
Additional questions for anyone? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Again, that's an informational item. Item number 5 is a resolution approving the parking reduction of Lot 2, Block 1, North Pond at the Preserve, 15th Edition, at 354 23rd Avenue East. Mr. Nelson, Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of West Fargo.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, like you mentioned, item 5 is a request for a reduction in the number of required off-street parking spaces. This is for a medical office facility on Lot 2, Block 1, North Pond at the Preserve, 15th Edition. In accordance with Section 4-450 of the city ordinances, such requests can be granted by the City Commission via resolution if it can be demonstrated by the owner that a lesser requirement is justifiable. The specific subject property that we're talking about here tonight is located at 354 23rd Avenue East. I apologize I didn't include a map here, but it's on the south side of I-94, about a third of a mile or so west of Costco. The applicant is the project architect for this construction project that's being proposed. Being represented here tonight, however, by Jeremy DeWalt with KLJ Engineering, should you have any questions for the applicant. The applicant is planning to construct a 2-story, 40,000 square foot medical office facility at the subject property. Specifically, it's a Vance Thompson Vision, so it's a vision related medical office facility. The zoning code requires off-street parking at a ratio of 1 space per 200 square feet of gross floor area for medical offices, which in this case equates to a minimum parking requirement of 201 spaces for the proposed facility. Within the materials provided in your meeting packet here tonight, the applicant has provided a breakdown of their parking needs based on their specific operations as well as their specific anticipated staffing levels. And just in summary there, they anticipate the need for 87 parking stalls at day 1 when they open the facility, and then a total overall need of 133 parking stalls to accommodate future fit up within the building, which would be the maximum growth of that facility. Staff has reviewed the request and finds the proposed reduction to be consistent with similar use data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual. Reductions in minimum parking numbers are also supported by the West Fargo 2.0 Comprehensive Plan, as well as the West Fargo Parking and Access Study, which was completed in 2018 through partnership with MetroCog. Staff's recommendation is to approve the proposed resolution to reduce the required minimum parking ratio from 1 space per 200 square feet, which is the current requirement, to 1 space per 300 square feet, which would actually be consistent with the required number of parking stalls for just general office under the current zoning code. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have with staff, and there's a representative of the applicant here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Olson.
Is this something we should be considering, just changing to for medical purposes only, to increase the parking so we don't have to go through this process to change it from 1 per 200 to 300, just to be done with it?
Yeah, excellent question. I'd say overall, yeah, I think that was identified in the 2.0 plan as well as that parking and access study I mentioned. As you look around town, there is just generally an oversupply of parking, and so the recommendations from those studies were to take a look at comprehensively, maybe reducing some of those numbers, and so that is on our radar. It's one of those things that we're trying to prioritize along with a number of other things, and so we do hope to be back in front of you with a similar.
How does that process? How do we change it? Is it a simple change, or is it something you need to really invest a lot of time into?
It requires a little bit of investigation as far as what the appropriate numbers are, and then the process-wise, it would just be an ordinance amendment, so similar to any other zoning change.
Okay.
Additional questions, commissioners?
I'll make motion to approve the
Resolution?
the resolution.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson, second. Commissioner Anderson?
Anderson
Where did it
seconds.
come from?
Anderson seconds.
Anderson.
Olson first.
Olson second.
Nope.
No vice versa.
Well, that's the way I had it the first time, you two. All right. Commissioner Olson moves. Commissioner Anderson seconds to approve the resolution of the parking reduction of Lot 2, Block 1, North Pond at the Preserve, 15th Edition at 354 23rd Avenue East, as presented this evening. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6 is an update regarding public art in the city of West Fargo. Mr. Malachi Peterson, City Planner, City of West Fargo. Good evening, Malachi.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for having me. So tonight, I'm just going to be providing you just a really brief update here on a project that was started last year. Your commission approved some funding to do some public utility box art wraps this previous January, and that project has now been completed. I'm not sure if you folks have been able to see them quite yet, but we did have 4 boxes that were wrapped. 3 of them were located on Cheyenne Street in the Yards Business District. The one up here in your upper left-hand corner here, that's located on the corner of Main and Cheyenne over by Sandy's Donuts by the gas station there. The B wrapping utility box that is right down by the POWMIA Plaza, right outside of the old Bell Bank building. The horses public art that is located right over by Choice Financial. And then my personal favorite, the dinosaur with pizza, is over at the 32nd Avenue in Cheyenne, across the street from the lights. We were able to receive a grant from the North Dakota Department of Commerce, or not the North Dakota Department of Commerce, I should say the North Dakota Council on the Arts, for about $1,000, $1,200. We did receive $2,500 in sponsorships from local businesses, along with that $8,000 that you folks approved for the project. The project in and of itself only ended up costing $4,549, so that means about $7,000 went back into the North Dakota, or into the sales tax fund for the city. We had a lot of different sponsors, including, I did get a couple of questions on this. We had the Downtown Community Partnership and then also the Fargo Business Improvement District are listed as sponsors on the utility boxes. That's because the program that we used was actually a partnership between the Downtown Community Partnership, the Business Improvement District for Fargo, as well as Office Sign Company, and then also the local arts partnership of the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. So it was a program that they had developed 2 or 3 years back. Basically, you're able to go on to a website that the arts partnership has. You're able to pick out some different art options, and then the Fargo bid coordinates sort of the measuring of the boxes, figuring out, how much it's going to cost, how it's going to be printed off, and then Office Sign Company ends up printing off the wraps and ends up wrapping the boxes themselves. So that's why they're listed on this sheet and then on the boxes themselves as sponsors of the art. That is all I had for the update on these public utility boxes. And then I also wanted to touch very briefly on the fact that city staff is working on applying to 2 different grants right now to potentially help fund a placemaking or public art master plan. Within West Fargo 2.0, the city's comprehensive plan, it calls for the creation of a public art master plan to kind of help unify and direct the city staff as far as how art should be situated within the city of West Fargo. The National Endowment for the Arts, they have a grant called the Our Town Grant, which you can ask for up to $50,000 for that particular national grant. I applied for that grant back in 2019, 2021, and now again in 2022. 3rd time's the charm, hopefully. It's a national grant, so it's kind of a long shot. The city's competing with a lot of other cities across the U.S. for that. That grant will actually be submitted tomorrow for that. That grant would, if we received it, require a 1-to-1 matching grant from the city. Before we would, accept the grant, if we were to be awarded the grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, I would come before this commission again to ask for that 1-to-1 match if we should ever receive that grant. There's another grant that we're also applying for, which is a new grant this year. It's the Public Spaces Initiative grant. The Economic Development Administration got a lot of money at the federal level. It's COVID relief money that's filtering down through the states now. The state of North Dakota, the Department of Commerce, is doing this grant to basically, along the Main Street initiative principles of creating a vibrant community, So they're offering up to $100,000. It does not require a local match at the local level to assist in placemaking or planning for placemaking. Placemaking is a little bit different than public art because it can also include things such as architecture, landscaping, events and activities of that nature. But both myself and then also the Economic Development Department, as well as the city communications team is working on that grant, which is going to be due in September. And that is all I had as far as updates go.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions? How was the artwork selected?
Yeah, so we did a public poll, which was done online, and I believe we had around 178 responses to that poll, where people were able to choose which of their favorite options of art were going to be selected. For the one which is the horse one outside of Choice Financial, Choice Financial was actually given the opportunity to pick 3 different options to be voted on by the public just because of how large of a sponsorship that they offered for the wrap itself. Unfortunately, fortunately for me, because my favorite, like I said, was the dinosaur one. But unfortunately, one of the designs that was originally picked within that public poll that 178 people voted on was another bee-type themed project. However, due to some miscommunication between the Arts Partnership and the Downtown Community Partnership for that particular piece of art had already been selected by another organization, and it just hadn't been taken off of the catalog for the online selection. So then we had to go to our 4th most voted piece of art, which was the dinosaur one.
Questions for Mr. Peterson, commissioners? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is the second reading and the final plat approval of proposed stockyards first edition rezoning from agricultural to heavy industrial at 851 Arena Road. Mr. Nelson, Planning and Zoning Director.
All right, thank you, and hello again. So, before I dive into this one, I just want to start out by saying this one has a bit of history to it. It's a little bit, the path that this is taken to get before you tonight is a little bit unorthodox and not typical, so I apologize if there's any, I'll try and explain the best I can, kind of the history leading up to this item here tonight, but if there's any questions, please do stop me at any time. And so the subject property we're talking about tonight is the old Stockyards facility, 351 Arena Road. The property is, I believe, just over 80 acres in area, and it's located between 9th Street Northwest and the Cheyenne River, as well as between 7th Avenue and 12th Avenues Northwest. The property actually has 3 different owners, GS5 LLC, KPH Inc., and 3 Cards Partners LLC, they're all represented here tonight by Matt Prochniak with More Engineering, should you have any questions for the applicant. And so the request for you here tonight is for final plat approval, as well as second reading and final adoption of the corresponding zoning change ordinance. The first reading and the public hearing of the zone change was actually held and approved by the City Commission back in June of 2021. Since that time, the applicant has submitted a new and revised subdivision application, which is different from the one that was presented in concept at that time. The revised application for subdivision went back through the Planning and Zoning Commission for preliminary plat approval in May of this year. And so those 2 items are coming together for final adoption here tonight is essentially what's going on. There has been no change to the rezone ordinance since the approval of the first reading. So the overall purpose of this application altogether is to establish development entitlements for future industrial development of the subject property. The proposed zone change would rezone the property from A, agricultural, to M, heavy industrial. And then the proposed subdivision would plat the property into 3 individual lots. And I'll pull up the subdivision here so you have a graphic. Apologies. This is the overall site aerial, and then the subdivision plat here. So the subdivision would plat the land into 3 properties, 3 lots, each abutting existing public right-of-way. Lot 1, which is, makes up the majority of the subdivision plat here, is 60 acres in size, which the applicant intends to develop with industrial rental units within a series of buildings serviced by private infrastructure. There is a site plan included in your meeting packet that shows the kind of illustrative version of what the developer intends for that to look like ultimately. Lots 2 and 3 on the subdivision are smaller in area at 16 and 5 acres respectively. The applicant has indicated they don't have any definitive plans for either of those two lots at this time. Some other highlights to point out here. The east side of the property is within the Cheyenne River Corridor Overlay Zoning District, which is basically a protective zoning district that runs along the Cheyenne River. There are on the subdivision plat building control lines that one along the river, which corresponds to that Cheyenne River Overlay Corridor Overlay Zoning District, and then the other, which is actually located on the west side of the property that runs along Legal Drain 21. And the purpose of those building control lines are just to keep development back from those bodies of water to protect the slopes there. There is a negative access easement included on the plat, running along the north side, protecting the arterial roads of 12th Avenue Northwest, as well as the intersection of 12th Avenue and 9th Street, controlling access to those arterial roads and protecting that intersection. Utility servicing wise, there is a request from the applicant for to bring public improvements or public infrastructure to the property via 12th Avenue as well as 7th Avenue. Infrastructure within the development, however, will be funded and installed privately within the private lots. The subdivision development agreement included in the meeting packet lays out the general terms of these improvements, and it also requires the establishment of a public access easement to allow public connectivity between 7th Avenue and 12th Avenue through the property, among other details of the improvements there. Also included in your meeting packet is a copy of the public dedication agreement for the subdivision. There was no need for public land from the Park District, and so the owners have agreed to a $140,000 fee in lieu of public land dedication. Again, since there's no need for any public land dedication with this industrial subdivision. This application does come to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission on the basis that is consistent with city plans and ordinances. And again, the request before you today is for that second reading and final adoption of the rezone ordinance, as well as final plat approval of the subdivision, which does include the subdivision agreement and the public dedication agreement, copies of which are both included in your meeting packet. So that was a kind of a high-level overview. Again, I'd be happy to dive in deeper with any of the details, if you'd like.
Commissioners, Commissioner Olson.
On the map that you have up there, on the left side, there's that little dotted line that makes an abutment and goes back to the east, goes north, then back west. It's right there. Yep, where your cursor is. What is that?
So there's actually two different parcels, tax parcels, that make up the subject property. And so that dashed line there is just showing where that parcel line falls for
Because
ownership.
on the previous map, where you got the blue there, it sticks out right there. That's why it caught my eye earlier when I was reviewing this. It's like, well, what is that? That looks suspicious or different.
Yeah.
Not suspicious, but
I
different.
apologize for that confusion.
Yep.
When the map was originally created, it left out that parcel, and so we tried to just include it there.
Okay.
So, but both parcels of land are included in this, so all the gray area here on this zoning map.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions, commissioners? Okay.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and the final plat approval of proposed Stockyards First Edition rezoning from agricultural to heavy industrial at 851 Arena Road. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 8. Project number 9027, asphalt overlays and paving equipment. Mr. Matt Andvik, Director of Public Works, the City of West Fargo.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. Tonight, I'll bring back, at the July 18th commission meeting, you guys approved the rehabilitation project for 7th Avenue Northeast, which is 9th Street to the city limits, and 9th Street Northwest from Main Avenue to the Drain 21, to do some asphalt overlayment as a public works project because of the deterioration to the roadway at the time. Excuse me. Once that was approved, we started getting going on because we had two machines that were set up for rentals for the pavement equipment. As soon as we got kind of the go-ahead and approval from the commission, we found out one of them was sold already, and the other one had kind of broke down, and we had used it earlier, and it really didn't give a very good finished product. At the end, we weren't really happy with it. So then when we started looking around, there was nothing to find for renting, and we were kind of spinning our wheels a little bit to try and find out where we're at. The only one we could find at the time was in Las Vegas, and they needed a rent-to-own purchase before they bring it up here. So that's when we really started kind of crunching the numbers on what it takes to rent, to purchase, and that's when we started really looking at it, going, it makes more sense for us to actually move forward, try to purchase one of these. And that was something that we did have in the 22 CIP, under the project 2097 as it is, the overlays with the new paving machine. And we had $300,000 budgeted for that in the CIP that was approved, because this is where we wanted to get to. We didn't bring this forward at the time because we really thought, this was kind of a last minute thing this year. We would just use this as a trial, rent it and go forward. But when we found out we can't rent one, then it really kind of moved forward into how would we be able to do this. So we were looking at different ones. We ended up getting 4 different quotes for 4 different machines. We sent some guys to DL. They watched those. Their public works guys in Detroit Lakes run the one that RDO had. We sent some guys down to Sioux Falls to go watch them. They had the Weiler, which we're kind of the one is what we'd like to purchase. I guess to save the questions later, the general equipment was the Dynapack, and that one is the cheapest one, right, of the 4. All of them are state bid list quotes, so we can kind of go off of every one of those. But the one we wanted to purchase was the Weiler, and that was about $267.56. The reasoning for that we wanted to go a little bit higher because we view this as a long-term purchase. For the amount of use we're going to get, for the 5 months out of the year, this machine, we should be able to last 10 to 15 years with it. Butler Machinery will, their maintenance is in-house in town. They have a pavement specialist on site that would be able to come and help us. The one that was a little bit cheaper is sold through general equipment, but they don't really have anything to do with it. It's through the manufacturer, so everything would have to go off-site for maintenance. They would have to bring somebody in. It's just more of a local, and then it had better, the GPS equipment on there is similar to what we use now instead of an older or a different system. So it's one of those things where it's like speaking one language and then trying to learn another one, and then so it just flowed a lot easier, and it puts down a better product in the end. So I think the difference is about $17,000. So over 10 years, we thought that would be worth that extra just to put that better product down in the end, because that's what we're looking for. And the whole point of this is to save money for the citizens of West Fargo to be able to do it in-house, but to do it at a high level where they're actually proud of what we're doing, and our crew takes the pride in that to do that as well. So that's to answer, I guess, anybody's question why we were recommending the purchase from Butler Machinery for $267,056 instead of the cheaper one of the bids. I kind of covered everything high level. I guess I'll open it up for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Ambick? Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Matt. Why did we sell the other one?
The other one we had was, I want to say 15 years old, and it mounted on the back of the dump truck that we had. So you have to have your road completely level, because if there's any dip in the road, if the tires go up a little bit higher, you can't really get that level. You're going to have those humps and bumps in there as well. So that's the the end result of the one that we had was for larger projects other than doing like a 5x5.
I think we had a little conversation about it. I remember that now.
Yep.
What is the cost to fix the one we have now? The one you say it needs it's broken down.
We don't, it's not ours.
Oh,
It
that's
was
not
just a
ours.
rental that we had.
We still have a rental?
We don't. We just rented it for one job this year. Well, and actually, we didn't even rent it, actually. They just loaned it out to us to use. So actually, we didn't rent it. They just, a demo, I guess, is what we did.
So that we don't, so the one that you have on here, it says one is having mechanical problems, so we're
Yeah.
not renting it now, I hope.
No, we're not renting it at all.
Okay.
That was just the one that we kind of had set aside, that we kind of had two that we had targeted that we could rent when we came to you before for the original project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
My question is, Matt, when you're doing all your numbers here, how are you grinding? You still have to lease equipment to do that, is that correct?
The larger projects, we will have either industrial builders, we've got quotes from them to do it because they have a larger machine. When we're gonna do like 9th Street or the larger ones where they come in, they can do that. We also have a small grinder that goes on our skid steer that will do. And if we ran to like over by Dolores Drive this year, we had an issue there where we had a sinkhole and then the street had sunk on that side. Well, we ended up putting, what was it, about 60 feet of asphalt in there, probably 3 feet wide, and the guys had to rake it out by hand to get it in there. Or if we had something like this where we had it purchased sitting there, we can just mill out, and it's more of a permanent fix at the time instead of kind of a so-so fix where we have to come back and do it later.
But on that topic, the grinder that we have could do that job.
Yes, they could do that one. It's only 36 inches wide, so it's not meant to do large areas. But when we go and we can do like a curb mill and then just kind of, go up 4 or 5 feet.
Commissioner?
Thank you. So what's our plan for larger products? Just to outsource it then still?
Yeah, for the milling part of it would be, don't quote me top of the head, I think it was like 15,000 or something like that to do 9th Street. So the milling for that is not crazy because we have the trucks that can haul it.
Cheaper than I thought it would be.
So it's, especially in certain areas when like industrial builders is right in town, the mobilization fee isn't that bad compared to if you had to go somewhere else to do it, so.
Okay,
In one of your paragraphs, the reason I asked the question like I did, Mr. Anvik, is that the estimated expense for the year is $567,000, which is $383,000 less than was listed in the CIP. Of course, the CIP including the milling and the overlaying. So, the milling is still in there is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it is, and actually,
So you're still having a net gain of
Right.
potential of approximately 383,000. Very good.
technically it actually would be more because that 567 actually had it factored in for rental.
Okay.
That was, we took, I guess the price, the paver and what we had estimated the cost of those two projects in-house, and that had factored in the rental unit, so I think we factored in about 30,000 for rental, so.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. Additional questions for Mr. Anvik? Commissioners?
I'll make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the asphalt overlay and paving equipment as requested by Mr. Anvik from Public Works. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, sir. Item number 9 is the Improvement District number 1339, Stockyards First Edition. Mr. Dan Hanson, City Engineer for the City of West Fargo. Mr. Hanson will be presenting on the approved amended engineers report and resolution approving amended engineers report. Mr. Hanson, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. In your packet, District number 1339, Stockyards First Edition, there is an amended engineers report in the packet. The difference, if you recall,
This project originally was going to be a large public improvement district that included all the interior roadways, infrastructure, and things and whatnot. And a number of months ago, Mr. Scott came and had an amended engineer's report for the commission that was approved that removed the interior private or public improvements to become private developments and changed the nature and the scope of the project. So the public improvements now that are intended to be done is to extend water and sewer services from both the north and the south into the property. And so we did open up bids for this project, and they came in above the 40% threshold of what we would be able to award. I worked with Mr. Shockley to come up with what is the next step. One thing that we did was we did make the owners aware. This is a 100% assessed district to the owners that are paying for it. We let them know of the increased costs that came in with the bids, and when we actually eventually potentially get to the award of the contract, which would be at the next commission meeting, we will have with us a letter from the developers that states that they're in agreement with it, would recommend that the commission proceeds with it. So we're not awarding the project to the contractor. The procedure right now is to come back and give the commission a new engineer's estimate through an amended engineer's report. So what this doesn't change the verbiage of what Mr. Scott had presented in the past. It just changes the numbers to reflect the bid prices that we received. So that way, if we do this, then in the next commission meeting, we would be able to move forward potentially with the award of the contract to the contractor. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Commissioners, questions? All right. Again, Mr. Hanson is looking for approval of the amended engineer's report and a resolution approving the amended engineer's report.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Anderson? We have a motion and a second to approve the amended engineer's report and resolution approving the amended engineer's report. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Next order of business is item number 10, is a project number 2262, a concrete pavement repair. As it will be presented by Mr. Dan Hanson, city engineer, City of West Fargo, looking for us to accept the bid and award the contract. Mr. Hanson?
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. In your packet is an informational package. We did open up bids, and we had 3 proposals that were received from contractors. Tyzac Concrete Incorporated was the lowest bid in the amount of $613,817.39. We are familiar with that contractor. They are one of the contractors for the Drain 45 bike path that we've been installing, so we have been working with them and are aware of their abilities. And with that, we would recommend that the bids be awarded to Tyzac Concrete Incorporated in the amount of $613,817.39. And with that, I'd take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Hanson?
Just for
Please,
clarification.
Commissioner Olson.
This is for here and there and everywhere throughout the city, right? This isn't identified on any certain streets. I mean, it is, but
Correct.
it's basically going to be fixing potholes and.
Yep, spalls and things of that nature. We've done these, this is a continuation of our maintenance of our streets, and it's a number of different places throughout the community.
And this falls within the dollars we have allocated in our CIP?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve and accept the bid and award the contract for project number 2262, concrete pavement repair. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Item number 11 is project number 2263, a traffic signal installation at 9th Street and 10th Avenue East. Mr. Hanson is bringing that forward this evening for the purpose of accepting the bid and awarding a contract. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. In your packet is a sheet showing that we did open up bids and we did have 3 proposals received for the installation of a traffic signal at the corner of 9th Street East and 10th Avenue East to help facilitate traffic movements with the new fire station. The bids were very close, all of them, I believe, within about $15,000. So, I mean, it was a very competitive bid. Strata Corporation was the lower bid, and we would recommend that their bid amount of $427,914.20 be awarded to Strata Corporation.
Questions for Mr. Hanson? Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve project number 2263 to accept the bid and award the contract for $427,914.20. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item number 12 is the revised ballot sales tax wording to be presented this evening by City Attorney John Shockley. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo Commission. The commission may recall last time made some slight revisions to the ordinance, and the question that came from the commission was, could we combine the 2 issues into one? Upon further research, the city charter is very specific in that it requires any sales tax ordinance to be published and voted upon separately by the voters. In order to combine the questions, you would actually have to remove that authority from the voters and increase the sales tax. And I guess based upon my recommendation and staff's, it would be more difficult to explain to the public that you would be taking away their right to approve an ordinance than to have two ballot questions. So we tried to word it as best as we can to make it clear that by voting yes on the first question, you're increasing the maximum amount of sales tax by 0.5 cent. That would go to police and fire. And then the second one is that you're approving the ordinance amendment to dedicate that 0.5 cent to police and fire. I can answer any questions. The next step would be to get the ballot question to the county, get the proof. The question will be published in the newspaper, as will the ordinance. It's always available for members of the public to review. And I would defer to our communications department, but I'm guessing it'll probably also be available on the website too.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions, commissioners? Mr. Shockley? Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, and some of this language here, I'm looking at 1/2 of 1%, and in parentheses, it's got the crossed out 0.0, and then it shows 0.05%. That, to me, I think is 1/20th of a percent as opposed to 0.5%. And then it's like that. So page 3 on the ordinance, and then item number 1, and then also I see that in item number 3. I might be reading it wrong, but I want to make sure.
Where'd you get that at?
I'm not sure what he's asking.
It's down here. Number 3, 1/2, 1% of the 2%. Yeah, I can certainly change that. How I'd originally proposed to split it up was that you are increasing to 2.5%, so you'd actually be giving 20% to the police and fire department. I made this change based upon input at the, one of the prior meetings, but I could certainly change it back to make it more clear. That's the ordinance, that's not the ballot that's being voted on, so.
I think we want to
Commission
keep it
President.
as simple as we can.
Well, right.
Commissioner Olson, you
Yeah.
had your hand up first.
On what Commissioner Anderson said, if you're looking on page 141, right there where it is the .05, it is confusing because below that is 2.5. So it's a half of a tenth of a percent.
Right.
Is where it looks confusing in the actual ordinance there. Yeah, it was a good catch there.
Mrs. Fisk.
Yeah, the whited out portions will not show up in here, but it was actually myself, because I thought it was more confusing to say 20% of the 2.5% will go here, and 33.33% of it will go here. So I had asked Mr. Shockley to change it to where, the way it sits right now, and then the unmarked copy would not include any of the crossed out items, but it's whichever you all think is the easiest for the public to understand.
Yeah, no, I think how it's underlined, the 25% is, I find that kind of confusing, but the first part where it's underlined here, it's the issue where we have the decimal point and then it's 0.05%.
Yeah, that should be 0.5.
If it's 0.5%, it would be 0.5.
Yeah, it should
Yep.
be.
So on that number 1 and then number 3, I see the same thing. Number 2, it says 1.5, and that aligns with the words, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Any additional questions on this item? All right. Item number 13 is the city administrator's report. Mrs. Fisk,
Probably should just,
do you need action item on this?
yeah, we should probably have a motion that you want to go ahead and put it on the ballot.
I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and second to approve the ballot sales tax wording as discussed this evening with those changes. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, moving on.
Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you very much. I only have one main item on here, and it is that you had requested at the last meeting for staff to go back and price out replacement of the Techni arborvitae trees that are on the south side of our parking lot. And including, so Tony from Buildings and Grounds took care of that, including staff time and equipment use, and the Techni arborvitaes, they would be 8 feet tall. The total cost of the project would be $3,268.04.
Questions from the commission?
How much was that again?
$3,268.04.
That's for how many trees?
That is for, let me see, what has he got here? I didn't print the email.
Should be 6, right?
I think it was,
There's 3 right there.
I think he had to buy them in a lot of 8, but I can't tell you for sure without going back to my email. I'm sorry I didn't print the main email out from him, but it's more trees than what are needed for a couple of the spots, but he felt that there were other places he could place them along that same row.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Does that include, Tina, does that include labor, everything? That's the total price.
Yep.
Do we need a motion on that? To go that?
I think that, well, I would think first that we just need to have you communicate with Mr. Hanson in reference to, right?
I've already spoke with Mr. Hanson. He was aware that you had directed staff to go get a price on this and that I would be bringing it back to this meeting. I told him where the costs came in. We had a discussion, and he is fully aware of the cost differential between this and the other.
So did he indicate to you whether or not he was willing to make up the difference, or does he want the trees planted then?
He gave no indication that he was willing to put up a fence or cost share in a fence. He just made it very clear that he has maintained the trees for quite some time, and he does not plan to do that anymore. That's all he said.
Okay. So what does the commission like to do?
I think we should at least do this, I guess, get the trees. I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the expenditure of $3,000 as presented by Mrs. Fisk this evening for the replacement of those trees. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
The final item I have is to request that you please, now let's say it properly, keep an eye on your calendars. Remember, Melissa sent out all the invites for the Chesney videos to promote West Fargo, so just kind of keep an eye on that, and if something comes up, be sure to let her know so that she can rearrange to make sure that she gets a hold of all of you and gets you all on there, so thank you.
Any correspondence?
Emily handed out to you the 2 pieces of correspondence that we received.
Thank you.
One was a thank you, and the other, they were both thank yous, actually.
Item number 15 is non-agenda items. Commissioners, Commissioner Olson has an item.
September 5th is our normal meeting, and that's in September, and that's Labor Day. And I would rather just move it to the 6th rather than skip a meeting and have a 300-plus page agenda in the middle of the month.
Yeah, I like that too.
Agreed.
I agree.
Do we have a consensus, Commissioners?
Yep.
The date is moved to September 6th. Thank you. Good point. Any other non-agenda items from the Commissioners? Commissioner
I
Olson,
have one more.
please.
Last week on a local television station, there was a news story about a dilapidated building. It was over in Dilworth, and the troubles that the city was having working with the landowner and going through the process and all that. And it got me thinking as to what is our process to do that. So I reached out to our administrator, and then Mr. Shockley has provided some input. So I just wanted to know, do we, how does that all start? Do we have to wait for citizens to complain about abandoned property and they're going so bad, or do we have something where we can step in and maybe tackle it ourselves before it gets to be that bad?
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Commissioner Olson, there is a specific ordinance that the city passed pursuant to its authority under the Century Code. It is for dangerous buildings. Dangerous building action can be either initiated by a citizen complaint or by the commission. If the commission wants us to go forward with a dangerous building, we certainly can. The first step in the process is to have the building administrator, they will perform a report regarding the condition of the property, whether or not it is dilapidated, whether or not it's dangerous, and the costs to fix it. The next step is then you provide notice to the property owner. The property owner has the opportunity then to fix it or demolish it, depending upon the value of it. If the property owner refuses, then it comes before the city commission, and then the city commission has to make the decision whether to allow them to fix it. Usually you put conditions on them fixing it, give them so much time to demolish it, or full-on order the demolition of the building. The costs of the demolition, if the city undertakes it, can be specially assessed against the property. About 6 years ago, the legislature amended the Century Code to allow us to specially assess any property owned by the owner within the city, because there were several property owners that had lots of property in cities, and they'd let one parcel go dilapidated, wouldn't fix it, and now we can assess all of the parcels that they own in town. The property owner does have an opportunity to appeal that dangerous building declaration to the district court. It's an appeal, it's not a full trial. And so it's always important that the hearing that you conduct before the city commission, you give them an opportunity. They've noticed I would assist with all that, but that's the general overview of the process. It always starts out with the building administrator and an inspector performing those inspections so that we have a factual basis to make those orders. Over the course of my career, I've done hundreds of those actions for different cities. They all have pretty much the same cadence. Usually the property owner disagrees. There's a few cases in which they agree that it's dilapidated, but it's always they usually don't want to demolish the building. And so ultimately it comes back to the governing body if you want to go ahead and order the demolition. So my advice to any city considering it is if you want us to engage the machinery, make sure you actually want to order it demolished. It's to me, I don't like to engage the process if we're not going to see it all the way to the end.
Thank you.
But that's up to the commission, so.
And it would take the full commission to order our inspector to go out and do it, right? It would take a vote of the commission to go and do that. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Any other non-agenda items for the commission? Does any of the department heads have any non-agenda items they'd like to bring forward? Yes, please, come forward. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much, Commission. I'm going to hand out to you tomorrow. We are having an open house meet and greet for the community to be able to engage with myself, as well as board members and Friends members to get community input on the future of the library. So I'm going to submit this to you, and I appreciate those in the community who have already shared this invite with the community. It's not requested that you attend, although your presence is more than welcome, but there is a QR code, so if you have input that you'd like for me to receive, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, any department heads have anything for us this evening? Commissioner Simmons.
Move to adjourn, please.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all.